Okay, now this lesson is on the dodge tool and then all the tools within it, like the burn tool and the sponge tool. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that these tools are what I call permanent tools, meaning when you use them, you permanently affect the image because you cannot run these tools on smart objects. Notice there's no smart object icon next to my image layer, okay? So on that note, it's a good rule of thumb to, prior to using these tools, to always make a copy of the image you wish to affect in the layers palette, like I've done here. You do that by dragging the original image layer into the new layer icon down here. This way you always have the original image to work from should you want or need to start over. Now, we're going to go ahead and select this dodge tool here. And then we're going to look at the different options that we get for that tool. And the way that the dodge tool works is that it is used to lighten areas of a picture. Okay, now you can select the range of the color values that you want to manipulate. When I select shadows and I go into an image, I'm going to make my brush larger. And I go into an image such as this one. If I want to lighten this shadow area here, I would want to click, and I'm holding down and dragging across the area that I want to lighten. Okay, now the setting is set to 50%. So that means that as long as I click once and hold it down, that whole time that I'm holding it down, it will only allow me to lighten to 50% of that image value for that particular area. But if I let go like I just did and I go and I click again and do that, it'll allow me to do another 50%. And similarly, if I keep repeating that process, it'll eventually get light enough in here. And you notice that some of the colors are coming out. You also notice that the quality is degraded. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. You'll notice that the quality is degraded there, okay? And so this tool you need to use with caution and sparingly, and it's better to retake a photograph that isn't working than to try to lighten it this way, because then you're just going to get what looks like a not so good picture. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out. All right, so similarly we could go back to this tool and we could go to midtones, and now if I scroll, I'm going to scroll across here so you can get a sense for what that does. You'll notice that it affects the areas that are midtone, like that leaf here, more than it does this white area. Okay. Similarly, if I go back over here and I say highlights, it's going to lighten the light areas. Notice it'll barely do anything to the other areas. Okay. See how it affected the white and not the black here? All right. So basically, the dodge tool allows you to lighten, and it allows you to lighten by choosing the range of shadows, midtones, or highlights that you want to affect. And then you can change the exposure. I'm going to go ahead and show you the exposure here. If I go lower, notice that when I did this one here, it was at 50%, and as soon as I touched it just even once and held and dragged it, it just washed out my image completely, and that's no good. But now that I'm down to 12, I can do this more lightly. See? Okay, I'm still clicking, hold down and dragging, just kind of scrolling across it. And because I've set my image to 12%, it won't allow it to get any lighter than that 12%. Okay, but even 12% for lightening is quite a bit. Okay, notice everything's starting to get washed out. Now, on to the next tool. I'm going to go and grab the burn tool. And the burn tool does the opposite. It darkens shadow areas, midtone areas, or highlight areas depending on what you select here as an option. So since it's on shadows already, I'm going to leave it there, and I'm just going to go and I'm going to scroll across this image. I'm holding it down. Notice it is affecting the dark areas far more than it's affecting the white areas. So it's not that it doesn't affect the white areas at all, but it targets the dark areas, okay? Now, this is kind of hard to see here. Like, you don't really notice as much. Like, hey, what did it look like before? So I'm just going to go into my history palette. I'm going to step back so you can see the difference. See that difference? Okay. So that's what the burn tool does. It's basically darkening that area. Similarly, again, if I select midtones, then when I click on this, it's going to select the midtones. Okay. Now if I go to highlights, it's going to focus on the highlights. Notice it's darkening these highlights here, turning them a little bit more gray. Okay. Now the rule of thumb with this is that you use these tools sparingly. It's only to minor correct. It's not going to solve a problem completely. All right, so the next tool that I want to show you is the sponge tool. And with this sponge tool, it allows you to either saturate or desaturate the image, okay? Now, saturating will allow you to add more color to the image or more purity of color, so it'll usually become brighter. And then desaturate will allow you to take away the intensity of the color, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and make my brush a little bit bigger, and I'm going to go, say, to an area like this. Right? I just took away some of the intensity. Now I'm going to do it again. Notice it's also taking away some of this yellow kind of color here. All right. Now it's kind of hard to see what that just did, but basically if I step backwards, it kind of stripped it of the color. The more that I went and clicked over it, the more that it took it away. So that's desaturating it. Okay. Notice there. Okay. Now I'm going to go to saturate, and that does the opposite. If you have a color and you click, hold down and drag over that area like this, it brightens that color. We're going to go back. Okay. And of course, with any of these tools, you can change your brush size. You can do it here, okay? And or you can create your own manually, select your own selections here. Or you can use your hand commands to just make it larger or bigger, left bracket and right bracket, okay? Okay, this concludes your lesson on the burn tool, dodge tool, and sponge tool. If you have any questions, I led at hawaii.edu or 808-343-9565.